More than 140 million people in this country are poor or one emergency away from economic ruin, including more than 70 million women, according to the Poor People's Campaign. Now, today in Washington, D.C., dozens of activists took part in the Women's Moral March, demanding action from Congress to pass all provisions of the For the People's Act. Let's listen.
I came out with my two little girls to the protest because more and more states are enacting bills that are going to make it more and more difficult for people to vote. And this largely discriminates against people of color and women and people with disabilities. I would love to see the Congress end the filibuster so that at the federal level in the Senate, we can pass the For the People Act that will enshrine voting rights once and for all on a national level. Leaving it up to the states just provides too much chance for laws that limit voting rights, and I think it should be voting rights across the board at a national level.
So all of this conversation about what we need to do is to make voting secure. It was secure. We're going to make voting safe. It was safe. We don't have aliens coming to vote in Michigan and other parts of the country.
As you can see, voting rights today is taking center stage on the ground in Georgia and in Texas, as well as D.C. The Senate Rules Committee holding its first field hearing in 20 years, focusing on Georgia's restrictive voting law that cost the state the MLB All-Star Game. Meanwhile, in Washington, D.C. and in the Texas Capitol, voting rights advocates rallied this morning while Texas Democrats kick off their second week in Washington, trying to stall a vote in their state. 5 of them testing positive for COVID despite being vaccinated. Joining us now, Latasha Brown, co-founder of the Black Voters Matter Fund, who is in the state of Georgia, and Virginia Solomon is the president of the League of Women Voters. She's on the ground there in Texas. Latasha, let's start with you and talk about this unusual hearing in Georgia. Mitch McConnell is blasting it as a silly stunt, a partisan circus, saying in a statement, you have to ask yourself why Democratic politicians across America are this panicked and this hysterical over modest ballot integrity measures like voter ID, which big majorities of Americans support. So let's start by getting your response to that.
Well, you know, it's a couple of things. It's really interesting of how disingenuous he is. It's as if you continue to tell lies, people will believe it. You know, the bottom line is, the question I think for me would be, why wasn't he so afraid, as well as the Senate Democrats and Senate Republicans, from even having a hearing? What is wrong with actually listening to people, you know, and thinking about when you're talking about what we're fighting up against? We're not talking about voter IDs. What we're talking about is federal legislation that is needed to protect and make sure that we protect access to the ballot. He knows that. So really, in fact, what he is saying is another part of the big lie, to a continuation of the big lie, to really not focus on the issue at hand, which is the voting rights of people are actually being attacked right now. What we're seeing in Georgia, we should be seeing all across this country, and I'm glad that they're leading that. We literally have to have a hearing of really understanding how egregious these voting suppression bills that are all across this country. The fact that the Democrats had to leave from Texas to go all the way to D.C. speaks to how intense it is. The fact that you've got working class people and folks of all races and ages that are leaving work, that are coming to D.C., that are protesting, that talks about how serious. So it's really interesting that he refuses to acknowledge how serious and urgent it is, because quite frankly, he is part of that crowd that are voter suppressions in chief.
Now, Virginia, Texas Democrats themselves say they can't stay in D.C. forever, and they don't have the numbers to block this legislation in Texas from passing once they do return. So what's the point of this rally in Texas today?
Well, the thing is about this piece of legislation, which is just so absolutely egregious. The big lie, Latasha is right. The big lie has taken hold of state legislatures all throughout the country. And so it's really legislation in search of a problem that does not exist. And so today we had faith leaders and leaders from all throughout the state of Texas speaking to Republican legislatures, saying it's time to hit the restart button. And these weren't just Democratic voters. These were Republicans and Democrats who are saying, do not take our voting rights away. And if you do, we will vote you out of office. And they're also saying that if there is not a solution here, we will take our fight to the nation's capital.
And Virginia, on the federal level, Democrats already tried and failed to move forward for the People's Act. That was supposed to be Democrats' solution to these state GOP-backed laws. Now, as far as the Texas Democrats' efforts, I did have a chance to talk to a Republican lawmaker, Representative Travis Clardy, and he said it's a matter of when, not if, the GOP bill gets passed. Take a listen.
I expect that if we don't come back to the special session, Governor Abbott will most certainly call a special session. I will tell you, we will act on these priorities. And there's a lot of things that are important to the people of Texas. So my hope is that this can be done peacefully and that they will matriculate their way back to Texas and we'll get back to work.
Virginia, it sounds like Democrats are pretty stuck. So what's the next move?
Well, look, eventually they will come back. And there are going to be, I'm sure, attempts to continue to put this legislation forward. But we are trying to urge to the Republican legislators to change their mind. It is not too late to change your mind and do right by the voters, or they will face the wrath of voters at the ballot box. And, you know, again, this is a coup on the behalf of the Republicans to be able to entrench themselves into leadership, into power within the state, because they see the demographics are changing. And we hope that Republicans of goodwill will come to their senses and know that the voters do not want this. And this is, again, voters who are Republicans and Democrats who are saying we don't need this. So politicians want it, but the voters don't. So, you know, the problem that we're seeing here is far greater than just what's happening in Texas. It's happening all around the country, and we will continue to fight this good fight because we know that every person should be able to have a voice and their vote in this country.
Now, Latasha, the president gave a big speech on this topic. I know you also met with the vice president last week. So how do you feel about how the administration has handled this issue so far?
You know, I will just be honest. I will not be satisfied until we have federal legislation. You know, the bottom line is what we see right now. We're being attacked on all levels. We're seeing state legislation, where bills being passed. We're seeing an assault. We're seeing the Supreme Court rulings that literally are taking away the strength of Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. And then on top of that, we're seeing this perpetuation of this big lie that simplifies everything as if this is about a voter ID. I wish this bill was just about a voter ID. This is not just about a voter ID. This is literally around weaponizing the administrative process to actually undermine people's access to the ballot. And so what I want to see is I want to see the administration use every tool possible to use the full weight, you know, of the office of president to really be able to push for federal legislation, because that's what we need. We can out-organize ourselves or litigate ourselves out of this circumstance. Democracy, quite frankly, is under attack.
All right, Latasha Brown, Virginia K. Solomon, we appreciate your time today, both. Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.